Speaking of cast-offs and misfits, the AEW tag team title was on the line. The Acclaimed against Swerve and Keith Lee. And there were people in the corners. Swerve and Keith Lee had a guy named Fabulous. And Acclaimed had not only Daddy Ass, but a guy named DJ Who. And apparently, DJ Who and Fabulous were sitting together with each other because they got a camera shot of them together, the opposing friends. I don't know. Okay. Everybody's going to want me to do the caster rap. I'm not going to do it, and here's why. I was trying, but I couldn't never over the crowd and on the audio hear his first line when I was trying to write it down. And I said, you know what? I will just come out. The best line was that Swerve and Keith Lee looked like a 20-ounce and a 2-liter of Pepsi. That's how the story goes. It's more like Swerve in a glory hole. I never thought we'd get glory hole on wrestling television, but we did.
It was an interesting episode. We got prick on TV, but shit was bleeped.
Shit was bleeped. This match obviously was the one that the people were waiting for. The Acclaimed, at least one of them is from New York. People were waiting to see the belts change hands. They should have changed hands at the pay-per-view 2 weeks ago, as we mentioned. But Acclaimed have really, the people have decided we like them. And I wanted this to be good for them. And unfortunately, and I'm not sure whose fault it was, but I don't think it was the Acclaims. But this could have been a lot better. And first of all, they gave him the corpse referee. Wasn't there used to be a rule for the New York State Athletic Commission after you're 55 years old, you couldn't get a license?
Oh, I don't know. There was some really old ass, bad, awful referees sent from the Athletic Commission that I think were older than 55. So
no, that's, you know what? I've got it in reverse. California, you couldn't get a license after you were 55. That's why Blassie went to New York. Well, anyway, whoever gives a license to Rick Knox ought to be shot. Here's the problem with this match. Keith Lee and Swerve are not only not a good tag team because they haven't been teaming up very long, but also they're not very experienced apparently at tag team wrestling entirely. They're a heel tag team with baby faces that are over like God in this big crowd. They should have been shining them like a brand new penny from the start. But at the start, they worked it like a generic match without those, built-in fucking pluses, having your baby faces over like God and having a big crowd. And Keith Lee starts overpowering everybody. At one point, the Acclaimed went to scissor each other because they got one over on Keith Lee, and Swerve, the heel, drop-kicked both of them from behind, made the baby faces look like idiots, and that was a break spot. So the heel team should have been out there calling everything they could figure out where they could be bumped ass over tea kettle for these two guys for the first segment, and then get a heat spot to the break. But there was no tag team work in the whole first segment. Then they come back and they're getting heat on Caster. But then Caster makes his own full comeback. He didn't start a false comeback and then make a tag. He made his own comeback and then tagged Bowens. And Bowens kept it going. More comeback, but he never even went for a false finish one time before the heels then stopped him. The heels are greener than pepper trees, and the baby faces are apparently listening to what they have to say. So then Bowens foiled a double team move, but Keith Lee stopped him again and beeled him over the top rope to the ramp, which was a hell of a bump. And then choke slammed Max Caster, but then Keith Lee missed a moonsault, and everything came to a fucking halt. And then they set up, apparently, somebody was in the wrong spot, and finally they got it back. Swerve grabbed the boombox and was going to hit Caster, but Caster moved and Swerve hit Keith Lee. And, of course, Knox, the shitty referee, was leaning out of the ring for some specious reason, so he couldn't see it, but since Swerve lost his grip on the boombox, when he hit Keith Lee with it, it bounced off and went over the referee's head and landed on the floor outside the ring in front of him. So he had to ignore a giant portable stereo being flung across his head and down in front of him. Then, here's where something happened, and I'm still trying to figure out what. It wasn't that bad a match to this point, because even though it could have been better with an experienced heel team knowing what they were doing to call some shit, they hadn't really fucked up royally yet, except for the shitty referee. But then Bowens came off the top and hit the blockbuster, and Caster was coming off the top to go, what does he call his elbow? The mic check?
Mic drop.
Mic drop. He was coming off the top of the other turnbuckle for the mic drop. And because of the camera shot was on Keith Lee laying there tight, you suddenly saw Caster jump off the top. You saw him come in from the top of the picture frame and land on both feet and apparently tweaked his knee. Now, you shouldn't land on both feet like that going for an elbow. The only time I've seen anybody do that going for an elbow off the top and land like that was Shawn Michaels against Vader at SummerSlam 96 when Leon forgot to roll out of the way. And that's what Michaels started kicking him in the head for and yelling and cussing him for. Point is, Caster didn't drop the elbow. He landed on both feet and hurt his knee, and it looked legitimate because for no reason, he then dropped down, sold it, and rolled out of the ring, and there was conversation going on, and Bowens covered Keith Lee for a 2 count, and then everything stopped. And so I'm thinking, did Keith Lee, was he supposed to move, and he didn't move, and Caster pulled up and landed and tweaked his knee? The whole thing was screwy. So at that point, then, everything stops. There's some conversation. You see people yelling. Then Caster and Bowens grab Keith Lee, but he shoves them both off and tags out. That's why I think they were telling him something. And then Swerve comes in, and somehow Caster then climbs to the top rope with the bad leg, but he's trying not to put weight on the leg. Now, if the leg's not hurt and he's selling it, then it makes absolutely no fucking sense whatsoever in the context of this match. So I think that somebody fucked up. Keith Lee didn't move. He landed on his fucking feet trying to pull up, hurt his knee. They started calling audibles. How do we get out of this? He climbs to the top with one leg. Swerve stops him. I wrote, what the fuck are they doing? Swerve tried to fireman's carry a one-legged man off the turnbuckle into Keith Lee hitting the ropes and giving him a pounce. But since the guy's got one leg, he just crumpled in a heap, and the crowd started booing, and then I was getting embarrassed for everybody. And then they powerbombed Caster and got a 2 count. And then Bowens pulled Caster to the floor, and I wrote, God, why don't they go home? And then Swerve, the heel, wipes both of the baby faces out on the floor with a flip dive over the top rope. And then Swerve and Billy Gunn faced off, and Billy Gunn, the babyface manager, gave the heel a famouser on the floor, rolled him in. And then Caster did the elbow off the top where he doesn't land on his fucking feet like that. 1, 2, 3. Big pop because the people wanted to see him win desperately. They dropped the confetti. The match at the pay-per-view stole the fucking show and was great. And the people were going out of their minds. And they had the magic moment. And they fucking fumbled it. And then they come back 2 weeks later to try to rectify that and make the magic again. And I don't know if the people in the building noticed it, but this match goddamn fell completely apart to the point where I was hurt for the guys involved and wanted to see, and it's not the Acclaimed fault. I don't know how or why Caster hurt his knee, but the match wasn't good then because Lee and Swerve are a rotten heel team that called no teamwork spots or any kind of shine for them. And the crowd wanted to love it, but it fell apart, and the Acclaimed were if anybody noticed, I mean, maybe everybody's just so happy they won the belts, but I felt bad that their big moment of triumph was rotten. And like I said, it mostly wasn't their fault. And then, before you say anything, we go back for an interview in the back with FTR, who get a 60-second fucking backstage promo. They still want a tag title match, but they got 10 words out, and the Gun Boys come in and make fun of them and are wise asses to them, and then walk off and leave FTR standing there, and FTR gets no response. So now, just so we're all keeping track, the time has passed. FTR will now not be the AEW World Tag Team Champions while they're the Ring of Honor and New Japan and AAA champions, because now it makes no sense. The new champions, the Acclaimed, are baby faces, and nobody wants to see them lose. The Buckaroos got their way. Now, if there's a rubber match, the third match between the Young Bucks and FTR, the Bucks will win, if they still indeed work for this company by that point, because now it won't be the big, important pay-per-view main event match where FTR wins the rubber match and gets all the tag team titles and fulfills what the people wanted to see 3 months ago, because now the people have realized they're never going to see what they wanted to see, so now they've latched onto the Acclaimed. Now they've got the belts, and it would make no sense whatsoever for FTR to wrestle the Acclaimed, because it would damage FTR's standing with their fans that they've gotten over with, to take the belts away from the new team that the fans have gotten over. And now the perfect excuse then for the Bucks to win the third match, if they ever book it, and if they come back to work here, is exactly that. Well, it's not for all 4 belts now, so who gives a shit? So they win in the end. And FTR is back there getting punked out by the Gun Boys. Your thoughts on this whole mess, Brian?
I don't think there'll be a third match. Let me start by saying that. I was enjoying it, although it was sloppy, and then it got really sloppy. When Max Caster came off the rope, either selling his knee or it seemed more likely tweaking his knee, I reacted kind of the same way the room did. Like, oh no. And it killed the match. And they tried to do stuff to get it back. One of the worst things about planning out spots in your head and then convincing other people to do it is when they don't work at all. And whatever that spot was where they were going to have Keith Lee run into Caster, I mean, even if it had worked, it wasn't going to work. I mean, it just wasn't going to work.
Well, no, I've set up and or been involved with a lot of tag team matches. And I can just tell you that anybody that knew what the fuck they were doing at that point in time, with whether the guy was hurt badly or just tweaked or whatever, with things going that way, they would have eliminated that, and they would have gotten straight to the fucking finish, to the meat of the matter, and got out there before they got any more on them. But they didn't. And that's what happened.
Well, one last comment, and you can tell me if I'm fair or unfair with this. The Acclaim went over. They should have gone over at the pay-per-view, but they went over here. They were prepared this time. They had all that pink confetti everywhere. Any problem with the Acclaim's big victory, but with the finish of it being Billy Gunn hitting his maneuver on the floor and then rolling the guy in? The fact that he played so prominent in the finish of the match that it wasn't just the Acclaim going over on their own and then celebrating with their manager, even if he had done something earlier in the match?
Well, I would bring up more of that, except that I'm not sure that was that an audible. Was that Billy going, Jesus Christ, are they ever going to fucking come to a conclusion here? Let me just do this. And then, I don't know, because it was so fucked up. Nobody would have called that finish to happen the way that it happened, even if they'd have hit all the moves right. Something was wrong there. Something happened. I don't know what the fuck. So, yes, that wasn't... The thing is, the heels didn't cheat for Billy to be a tit-for-tat situation. The baby faces were down on the floor, both of them, with their backs turned to their opponent. The heel does a fancy flip over the top rope and blisters all the fucking baby faces, and then Billy gets the opportunity to fucking hit the guy and roll him in. So yeah, none of this was good. Remember at the pay-per-view match when they hit that fucking big double team, Acclaimed did for a 2 count, I said, my God, if they had hit it right there, that'd have been the biggest finish in history. That should have been the fucking finish. None of this shit should have been the finish. I don't know what they called and what they just had to do on the fly. But this certainly was not the way they intended to do it.
Any thoughts on Keith Lee and Swerve as a heel tag team?
Yeah, they're rotten. Swerve, attitude-wise, I mean, I like Swerve, his look, the attitude, the promo. Keith Lee is starting to just annoy me with that fucking weird look, his smile he gets on his face, and the lilting voice, and the shit-sniffing look, and the whole 9 yards. But they have has Keith Lee ever been a heel before? Well, he was a babyface in NXT, wasn't he? I don't know. Maybe they just need experience. But no, this match was rotten from the start to a discerning eye. And looking at it as somebody who, okay, I managed the greatest heel tag team in the business at one point, at that particular point in time. What would they have done for these green baby faces to give them the best match and get them over in front of the big crowd? Lee and Swerve did none of it because they don't know how.